The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, says the U.S. has been defeated in 40 years of its challenge with Iran. Addressing thousands of students in Tehran, Ayatollah Khamenei said Washington has hatched numerous plots against Iran over the past 4 decades. He said the U.S. military confrontation and its economic and psychological warfare are part of such plots against the Islamic Republic. The leader noted that despite such American measures, Washington failed to reach its goal of dominating Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei stressed the United States' economic and military power is on the decline, adding that the country is much weaker than what it was 40 years ago. Lecturer at Coventry University, Mr. Kenneth Farrow, joins us now from the British capital, London. Mr. Farrow, welcome to the program. Walk us through the important points that came up in the statement made by leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khamenei.
Well, I think the statement was very important in that it outlined the history of American attempts to destabilize Iran. It outlined the fact that Iran has obviously resisted throughout the past 4 decades, and even before this period, the attempts from United States, different regimes within the United States to destabilize the country. And I think it is very important that we take a historical look at the situation, look at the incidences that have happened over the past 4 decades. Bringing up to the current time, the crisis point now is obviously the threat of sanctions and the imposition of actual sanctions by the United States. But of course, one of the most important points of the statement was the weakness of the United States compared to how it was 40 years ago. The United States is taking a hyper-nationalistic approach to world politics, and it's going in the face of globalization. Now, whatever people think about globalization, it does exist as a network of economic ties between various countries. And so the attempts by the Americans to threaten and to cajole several countries to break ties with Iran and to punish Iran for the allegations that the United States is making simply hasn't worked this time. It's failed to get even the ideologically hypersensitive countries like the UK and France and Germany to actually back it on this occasion. And then we have other countries like Iran and China who have economic ties with Iran, and they're not going to be willing very easily to actually cut those ties. So the network of all the economic connections, the cultural connections are very important. So here we have not just an economic war and not just a military war, but we have an ideological battle. And this is where we are at the moment, and this is why Trump is trying to be very bellicose and typically arrogant in terms of trying to impose the US will on the rest of the world. And it seems to me currently that isn't working.
Mr. Farrow, would you agree that the United States is heavily isolated when it comes to its Iran policy at the moment?
Well, I think it's heavily isolated, but obviously it has its allies and its proxies, for Saudi Arabia, for instance, and we're seeing the growth of right-wing nationalism in Brazil, for example, and in some countries in Europe. So I think America is isolated, certainly in terms of its attempts to use economics to punish Iran, and not just, when people say Iran, we're actually talking about the people of Iran. And so the people of Iran are going to suffer if other European countries and other allies of the US actually go along the road of joining in with the attempts to impose sanctions. And I don't think that's going to happen on this occasion. So America is certainly isolated in terms of its hyper-nationalism. It's certainly isolated in terms of this particular attempt to once again dominate Iran. And we have to remember that the statement from Donald Trump that he did not want the celebration of 50 years of the revolution, 40 years, 50 years of the revolution to actually exist. And so he's trying his best to try and destabilize Iran, and that's what this is about.
Thank you very much. Kenneth Farrow joining us from London.